I remember feeling lost. I remember feeling like, man, there's no way that there's life after the military. They're like, how do I get a job in tech if I haven't touched like modern tech? I've touched military tech, but not, you know, the modern day tech. So how I networked was using the Honor Foundation. It was structured to help people transition from the military into the workforce, but not necessarily like, oh, hey, here's a job, go figure it out. No, it's more of like, hey, this is how you should conduct yourself when you're out. This is how you change your language so people can understand. These are the people that you need to talk to fully grasp like military language and then transfer it to a language that everybody can understand.
Welcome to Getting to Yes with N.O.P.E podcast. I'm your host, David Floor. We're back here again, and the purpose of this podcast is to hear stories from professionals in their respective industry and share their awareness, how they leverage the acronym N.O.P.E to break through to their success in their next venture by networking, creating opportunities, being prepared for those moments, and excelling. So over time, we've heard some stories as individuals come in and share their stories around what it takes, asking the right questions to break into those industries, asking or making those introductions, creating opportunities for themselves, being prepared for those opportunities, learning from those moments to improve, and finally how they excel. So if this is your first time listening to this channel, welcome. And for those of you listening from any platform, please like, comment, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. Also, if you'd like to learn more from myself or the individual, please do not hesitate to reach out. Without further ado, for episode 2, I have a longtime friend, childhood friend, who I'm very excited to join this podcast this time around, Earl Miguel. We started together in elementary school, middle school, high school, but we have a unique background. So this is his opportunity to share, create that exposure, and an opportunity for you to take some key points away from him and apply it to your skill set. So Earl had the opportunity to go into different lines of work, but enough about me talking. I think it's an opportunity for him to introduce himself, and then we can start from there. So welcome in, Earl. Why don't you start off with where are you currently located, and then tell us about your background, and then we'll spend the next hour to learn a little bit more about getting to yes with no.
Yeah, man. What's up, David? Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. All right. So right now I'm currently located in the Washington, D.C. area. Only been here for about a year, but before all that, so yeah, back to like our childhood. So same thing, all the things that we started off from elementary school, middle school, high school, and then, we kind of drifted away for like college a little bit, but I mean, we always kind of kept in contact. So, this is me. I think one of the most important things here is like, coming from California, but most importantly, Silicon Valley. A lot of opportunities in Silicon Valley the moment we were being raised. Like me understanding like now the East Coast, we were pretty lucky to like get all the computers in Silicon Valley, being exposed to all that, which we thought was just normal, right? But this is going to carry on later on to my story, like just a little bit. I got into graphic design when I started high school, and eventually that became one of those things where I'm like, all right, hey, I got an award for graphic design. I got an award for like science and physics. So when I went to Cal State University in Long Beach, I had to pick one or the others, and I picked graphic design. Finished that off. And that was the part where I got interested in it, but also saw that if I kept with graphic design, it's such a common thing now, but graphic design has been like common, or it was uncommon back then. It was like a very like specified skill set. Now you can just open up an app and then like, you're good to go. but that interest was like a huge thing for me because I kind of saw that into the future. I just kind of convinced myself like graphic design is not going to go away. I'm going to keep with it. So I stuck it out at California State University in Long Beach or Long Beach State. And then I immediately got a job within that field. I was pretty happy that I wasn't like a starving artist or, waiting tables and trying to be an actor in LA or something, So it was
Just just
definitely
just some quick backstory for the
yeah,
folks that haven't had a chance to know our upbringing.
yeah,
So when Earl was talking around graphic design, for the audience listening in, this is the early 2000s. So
yeah.
Earl and I were in college or in high school, early 2000s. You can do the math of how old we are today. But
There
um, iMac computers were a big thing, and that we're talking about the blue boxes. It's in the computer, um, and the files are in the computer. So, but I think for us, uh, the exposure back in that time wasn't as big as it is now, right? Like you
yeah,
mentioned, like anyone can log on to the App Store, iOS or Android, and figure out what to do, or Google it, or YouTube it.
yeah,
Those didn't exist back when we were younger. So just kind of your approach and your mindset at that time was, hey, if I stick with this, the opportunities are endless. I just don't know where it's going to go, right? So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I wanted to make sure that the audience knew that, hey, we didn't graduate high school in like 2020 or 2000.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
was an opportunity where sometimes AOL was still a thing, and instant message chat was a thing, and
yeah,
Excel
yeah,
was a thing. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience prefaces that, like, they understand that, hey, you were into the tech scene early,
yeah,
because I wasn't. I was more around, what do I got to do to just kind of graduate high school and just
yeah,
figure it out from there, where you kind of had your idea set, where you knew where you're going to go after high school.
yeah. I mean, I kind of had it, right. That was like one of the things, right? Because like just going back to using like the N.O.P.E model, right? Like, hey, somebody started a graphic design course, and I think this is like completely rare because I mean they weren't teaching graphic design anywhere. Like you would have to go to like a college to go do that, and they were teaching it at Fremont High School. And so taking, it was, Mr. Smith, Mr. Jerry Smith, he was the guy that was teaching all the desktop publishing. And that was like his intro to me about what networking was all about. Because he saw something in me where he was like, hey, I really like your design skills. You're picking it up quick. Let me see if I can introduce you to a couple people. And then me just knowing that helped me network to a couple things. And I did a thing for the city of Sunnyvale where it was called Fun on the Run Truck, right? It was like my biggest accomplishment I did in high school that I thought for like the design stuff. I got picked by like the council from the city of Sunnyvale. They made my design into a truck, and it was like going around like whatever. That was huge. That was like my man. If I can do this now, there are more opportunities later on. And so what I did was I was like, hey, I'm just going to keep doing this until whatever. So preparation. The Excel part, I guess I didn't really launch that until like college and everything. So you could say like that was my big first step to N.O.P.E, right? That was like my big thing where I decided that there's nothing else. I'm saying no to a lot of things, the literal N.O.P.E, right? And sticking with this, and then networking from there, taking the opportunities, and then whatever. So by the time I was 19, 20 years old, I was already a contractor for Thermo Fisher Dynamics, or back then it was Dionix, now it's Thermo Fisher, and I was doing that for a little bit. And then I was doing like side contract jobs with other people who needed logo designs, website designs, just doing it for friends or just making designs like on my own and everything.
Yeah.
That was huge because that got me excelling in college and everything. That got me into like the first corporate job of, I interned at a place called ADD Marketing in downtown LA. I did that for a year. They wanted to keep me on as like a marketing and advertising guy, and I just said, hey, like I want to really leverage my graphic design skills. And so I got into a graphic design company that specialized in like, things from Petco to Target to Paramount Pictures and everything. So like that was like a huge moment for me because like now I'm dealing with like corporate entertainment brands that definitely had the exposure to like like I was helping out with that with the big scene. Um
So I wanna
yeah,
I wanna follow up here.
yeah,
You're, I grew up with you, and there was this glass ceiling moment. I think it was probably around like 2010,
yeah,
where we were talking to each other on the phone, and there was like this compelling moment for you where you just didn't want to continue to do this graphic design industry. And for the audience, everyone that's probably listening is like, okay, so where are we going with this story?
yeah,
Given that you in high school at a young age were always had that technology background and that artiste background, and you had success. So where are we going with this story? And
yeah,
for a lot of individuals on the phone, they don't have this opportunity that you do, that transition into the military. So this is kind of the segue to where are we going with this? And I remember having this conversation with you, and you were telling me, and I don't want to take away from your story, but I just remember saying, what are you going to do?" So why don't you share with the audience what was that moment where you just had this breakthrough where what I'm doing now is no longer sustainable, and I just don't continue want to do this, and this is my glass.
yeah. So there's like a lot of levels that like that happened at that moment because you're like I was about 25 years old. Excuse me. It was about 25, 24, and I'm looking at a couple things, and one of the core questions I asked myself at that time was like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Right. And I had that gut feeling of like, uh, I don't know, but it wasn't a hard yes and it wasn't a hard no. So because I was in that gray area, I had to go find out like, hey, like what am I really doing here? The more that I look back and the more that we have conversations like this, David, is like, I look at like how inflated my ego was back at the time. You know, I started contracting while I was in college. I had success in graphic design. I got a job in graphic design. Like that's super rare to find a job in your degree. And I'm like, okay, like I think I got it all, right? Like I had my apartment that was next to the beach. I surfed every morning. Everything was comfortable. And just because of that, one, I had an inflated ego. So I thought to myself, like, I can do anything. So that kind of helped me propel.
Yeah.
But also, I kind of realized, like, hey, like, this isn't it for me. This isn't I guess, like, I had a redefinition or I had to redefine, like, what success meant to me. And so, knowing the fact that I got all this, I actually had to say no to the very success that I had. I had to say no to the things that I was comfortable with. I had to say no to the things that like I worked a lot to network to network with the people that I got. But I guess deep down inside, this is one of those things where I'm like, hey, like I can do a little more. I can I think I still got some fight in me. Obviously, David, like you're into fighting and everything, like that is your sport. And I think mutually like working out and being fit and keeping up with the health, like that's a huge thing that me and you have in common. I just saw that into, hey, maybe I can go do that and go see the world. Maybe I can go do that and then experience like other things. Maybe I can go do that. And I just said, hey, I think the military might be like an option. Now, I didn't necessarily make it the option. It was just like a little kind of like whisper. It was just like, oh, maybe that's a thing. Not to go sidetrack or anything, but my great grandfather on my mom's side, William Glover, he was an army infantryman, like he retired in like 1910 or yeah, like 1910. My grandfather he worked for the Navy, and my dad was a uh, infantry officer for the Filipino Army. So there was like a lot of military background, but no influence. Actually, my dad didn't want me to go join the military. He was like, "Hey, I've worked this hard all my life. Like, why do you want to go? Like that's stupid." Right? And we had a huge disconnection on that. So the more I looked into it, the more I said no to a lot of things, the more I said no to even I would say, quote unquote, success at the time. Um, I started looking into what, like, it wasn't like a monetary thing. Obviously, you're not going to get paid a lot in the military. It wasn't a, like, I was pigeonholed to like, oh, you have to go now. Like, like, this is it.
Mhm.
It was like a choice that I said, hey, one, I want to go travel. Two, I want to experience like things around like outside of California. And also I wanted to make sure that I had like an understanding of who I was if I could keep pushing myself. Now, like that had nothing to do with like, your salary or anything. It was just more of this is a person who's doing it in reverse. Like I am doing the opposite of most people do. Whereas you typically join the military when you're 18 and you have no like idea. So I brought so many things into it from there, and that was like one of the.
Really quick, before you actually went into the military, you said that you laid out a couple options. What were the other options that you
Oh,
kind
yeah, yeah, yeah.
of?
So one, I wanted to change careers. So like I said, I think I had two careers, two majors I wanted to like accomplish. I wanted to do a graphic design major, obviously, but I wanted to do like science and physics. I got an award in high school for it. And I was like, hey, maybe this might be an opportunity to now dive into it. I picked up a physics book one day and I was like, man, this is why I didn't get into it. Like, so there was something a little dry about it, not like, I'm like a hands-on person. So just knowing myself growing up, like I'm a very tangible like learner. I'm a visual learner, and there's a lot of like mathematical cranking into like physics. So it just kind of it wasn't a that was like the hard no, right? It wasn't just like, ooh, maybe I can get into it. Like I'm super interested, yeah. And then I really started doing some research into it. I'm like, no, I can't change my career like into this. Like, yeah. Another opportunity was to be a professional surfer. And because I was right by the beach and I look at all these people who are like fit and all they do is surf. And I was like, maybe I can give this a try, right? Like I wanted to try something where obviously physics and surfing and then military are completely different spectrums, like are on the different ends of the spectrum. But it was just that I needed to know who I was first and kind of understand like that. I guess like the new adventure or the new self. Because what really helped me was finding that success first and believing in myself that I could do anything. So that gave me the opportunity to say, hey, I can go be anyone who I want to be as long as I can show the same effort doing the networking, increasing my opportunities, like really doubling down on preparation because I did all that in my graphic design career. I just never knew, how you phrase it by, N.O.P.E.
Yeah, so as you're making that transition, the simple case to get into the military is go to your local branch, neighborhood branch, and talk to a military recruiter, right?
Yeah.
So, uh, you're not 18 at this time. You're an adult. You're working in the professional field.
Yeah.
What was it that made you start networking within the military branches, and what made you decide to go one direction over the other? And this is your story to share. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what was that military branch that you decided to go to, and who did you network to get there?
Yeah. So at the time, so this is before I kind of like started talking to a recruiter. I just kind of like, put my name in the hat and be like, hey, I'm interested in joining the military. I don't know what branch to go to. I was at a CrossFit gym, CrossFit Seal Beach, at Seal Beach, California, right next to Long Beach. And uh, at that box, there were a bunch of military personnel who like got out or separated from the military or who like retired. So I had a
Sure.
lot of influence between people from the Navy, who were like Navy SEALs, people who were in the Army, people who were like Marines, because Camp Pendleton's not too far away and everything. So there was a lot of like this subconscious like influence. But so I just asked, I was like, hey, how was your time? And each and every one of them has said, man, it was the best time of my life. Even though it was so short and I wanted to do something else, whatever, like I had the best time. And I was like clinging on to that so much. Like the gold in that was they enjoyed it, and they enjoyed it so much that they all they can talk about or their memories that they had or their experiences weren't like, oh, this is what I did on my job. Like, oh, hey, when I was like 19 or 20, or when I was like 30, I did this with the military. So my prior to the um, prior to like the recruiter, I was definitely talking to just people in my community already that were already in part of the military, and then I started making my way like towards that, and eventually the one that sold me on the army part was like, hey, actually, I remember there was a girl, she was a Marine, and she said, um, she's like, Earl, like, why do you want to join like the army? Like, all you're gonna do is just probably die. You should be a Marine. Like, Marines never die. And I'm like, haha, like, no, like I don't want to be you then, And I'm like I want to go fight. And it was just like a casual conversation, like just poking at each other. But she then pulled me to the side and she goes like, hey, like if you're really thinking about this, like you should definitely consider, um, you know, going like the officer route or whatever. I think they're like, since you already have a degree, you should definitely go into that like realm because they're going to need smart people, like smart people to lead. And I was like, all right, yeah, I'll definitely do it. Went to the army recruiter and he said, hey, like, we'll definitely like have you join the army and everything. And then, from there
Yeah.
is, yeah.
So, kind of off topic, interesting point here where at some point I'll share my background and with the audience. But just to kind of tie to yours, I was at this fork in the road myself. I'm in tech today.
Yeah.
I'll share my story, but uh, I was a criminal justice major at San Jose State, and I graduated college in 2010 at the worst time to get into government. And I was trying really hard to be a juvenile probation officer and looking at all the other options like firefighter, police officer, just to kind of break in.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was just so tough to get in that I considered going into the military. But at the time, my wife now was my girlfriend, and she just was not opposed to like trying to do this long distance relationship. But then also too, at the same sense, I knew that if I graduated college, I would automatically be qualified for that officer ranking. So it was interesting that you
Yeah.
you brought that up because I had a classmate who was in the military that got out and went into college. And when I was kind of like contemplating that idea, he said, hey, Dave, when we graduate, you'll automatically qualify for an officer. I'm not saying what ranking you'll be, but because you've already gone to college, it's the options are there. So I just kind of wanted to add to that, not to take away from your story.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious though, you did mention something that I've never heard about when you were at your CrossFit gyms and
Yeah.
military folks were there. It sounds to me like they're already out of the military. They've done their tours, they've done their time, and they've mentioned that it was the best time.
Yeah.
What were they doing post post tours, post service,
Yeah.
and how are they applying their skills? Where you said, okay, I'm going to go into the military, and when I come out, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go into the military, and I'm going to continue to stay in the military. What was your thought process at that time?
Well, so at the time where I was
You
like
said, yeah,
talking to
you're
them.
going to commit to go to into the military and talk to the recruiter and say, hey, I think I want to do this.
Yeah. So for like, first of all, like there's something weird about or something different about talking to like people who have been in the military. There's like a certain, I guess, like specifically like certain people about themselves, like they carry themselves. They talk with their back straight. They're very direct in certain ways. They know how to like articulate. There was something of engaging in each and every one of them, like male or female. Like they just almost walked and talked with confidence, and I admire that so much. Maybe I wasn't as confident as I was back then, but all I knew is I admired so much about that. I think that's what sold me on it too, is about their persona or in their aura about like who they were and how they how they came off.
Sure.
Um, yeah, it was positive. It was confident. It was very engaging. Like I was drawn to them. So that was like another indicator. Actually, yeah, thanks for bringing that up because it was like one of those things. I'm like, man, I want to be surrounded by these people. Like these people are awesome. Like one, they work out, but two, like they work out with like conviction. Like they want to put in the work. It's kind of rare to find people that do that on a daily basis. They wake up and like, I'm going to do this today, you know? So,
So, I know there's obstacles that you faced at some point in the military. It, in call or in high school, you and I were always trying to get recruited by some military recruiter, and it's like, oh yeah, just come in. And
yeah.
at the time, one, thank you for your services. Two, my excuse at that time at 15, 16 years old was like, I'm flat footed, I can't go in. And so I would always use that excuse. I'm flat footed, I can't go in.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you face some obstacles to get to some type of level of officer ranking. I don't know the levels of the military branch and all, but before you share where you're share where you're at right now as far as your ranking for the military, for the military vets who are listening, or active military that are listening, share your ranking. But then what obstacles did you overcome to get to that ranking? And how did you leverage N.O.P.E to get through those obstacles?
Yeah. So let's just backtrack real quick on, like the whole like, hey, you got a degree, you can be an officer. Well, I took the time to figure out how long it would take for me to get where I'm at right now. So right now I'm an E7, so I'm a sergeant first class, and that's a non-commissioned officer. I'm not a traditional like commissioned officer. I figured out that if I did the non-commissioned officer route, it would be faster for me to get there rather than going to the officer route, because it would take me about 6.5 years to actually try and apply and then go do a 2-year pipeline after that, as opposed to where I stood was I could be done in 2 years. And that's what I did. So huge obstacles from the beginning, right? So I started basic training when I was like 27 years old. This is 2013, November. Got to basic training. I didn't really think anything of it, but I started realizing that I was 10 years older than the majority of the recruits there. They were 18 years old, 17 that had to get waivers, right? Because like, oh, I want to join now. These kids, pretty awesome, because I would say the majority of them that they knew, I would say 50-50. Half of them knew that they wanted to be in the military, and the other half was just there because they were just there. The answers that they were all giving me was like, oh man, like, I don't know, like what I'm doing, or like, I've been dreaming about this since I was a kid. And it was insane because I was like, man, I'm 27 years old. Like, I wasn't dreaming about this when I was a kid. I just wanted to go like play football, go hang out or whatever, like, so it was amazing that these kids already had that determination. So first obstacle, being 10 years older. I was immediately in like leadership roles the moment I got there, right? Because hey, like I was the old man in the group. And I mean, there were a bunch of like other older people there, but man, like the age difference was a huge thing because there were certain, our drill sergeants, there were certain drill sergeants that were younger than me that were there. And, like, it's really hard to go from like, I'm an adult already, right? And now I am taking orders from a person that's younger than me and yelling at me, and I have to do everything that they're doing. But I remember, like, this is where the maturity part comes in, right? This is where like an 18-year-old breaks, but not a 27-year-old, because I understand what I need to get done. They can get lost in a moment. Could you imagine if, somebody was yelling at us at like 18 years old, like you, David, or whatever, like we'd probably lose it, fight back or whatever, right? Yeah. Like there would be like no issues on that. Like we immediately be throwing fists or something.
Yeah.
The second obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles. So age was like the first thing, but man, like preparing myself for this was huge because I wanted to make it work so bad, but also I just knew that the moment I got into basic training, like I had no more control. I literally gave up my right to freedom, right? I could have done excellent, 100% in everything, but knowing the fact that they could have been like, hey, cool, Earl, like you did really well, you scored high scores, you're like, you're the PT stud, the physical, fitness stud. But you're probably going to be a cook now. Like that was an option. That was always there.
Yeah.
And that crushed me because it's like, man, I had to actually like tell my ego, tell myself to be like, you know what, like it could happen. Like I have no more control.
Yeah.
I would say as a civilian or whatever, be like you can change your careers. You can stop what you're doing and go somewhere else. There, you can't really do anything. The original guys that I started with was about 150, 150 of us, I think, maybe 170. And then only three of us passed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's me and two other guys that like weren't hurt, and whatever. And I mean, other people passed too, but like the 150 that I originally started with, because once you come together, there's going to be a like a mass amount of you. So overcoming that fear was like huge because I think if one thing I want to share about something that you can't control and you're being assessed and you're being, it's just like a very long interview process is I came in there knowing that I was going to fail every single day. Like I said, I kind of threw in a white flag every single day. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm probably not going to get selected. Like, what are the chances, right?
Yeah.
Like, less than 3% chance.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? If I'm going to fail, let me just fail. So let me just get that out of the way, get that anxiety out of the way. And let me just learn as much as I can. Because at least when I walk away from this day, I can just bring it on over. So, like, every day I treated I was going to fail, but every day I treated it as if I already failed. And I just kind of went throughout my day still learning. And that's when the quickest success started happening. That's when I excelled the most because the fear of not trying to look bad in the assessor's eyes was gone. I had the ability to be like, I'm going to do the best of my ability of what I can do right now, which worked out in my favor. Like I think that was like the best, like pat on the shoulder on me for like, hey, like don't be stupid. But bring all the things that you learn from being a graphic designer, right? So how does a graphic designer apply stuff to the military? Like again, opposite ends of the spectrum. One of the things that I learned from being a graphic designer is like I understand like spatial things, right? So I understand like if things have moved from a picture or an environment, I catch on pretty quick. Or if I need to draw something, say for surveying like an enemy base, like whatever, like I can draw and sketch it out. I can it's not helpful in the bigger picture, but it's like these little small tidbits that you fit in because an 18-year-old probably wouldn't have that skill. So you applied the skills that I had that I'd taken with me and then I applied it there. I think those obstacles and how I got through it helped me through every phase. And eventually I graduated and that really excelled my career like from there because I found out who I was. I found out I'm like the tech intel guy of the group. Like I know computers because of graphic design, so I'm good with computers. I'm good with electronics. I'm going to be doing that. I'm good with like retaining information because of college, right? Like they throw like you have a final every semester, like that's retaining knowledge, and that's something that's easy for me. Like, hey, we have a new mission or something. Hey, you learn everything about it. Okay, cool, got it. Like, give it to me. I'll regurgitate it out, and so you guys can understand it, right? So the it's not necessarily like graphic design skills, but like the disciplines that they teach you in say college, school, or just learning on your own apply, definitely in the military.
Yeah, you brought up some interesting points. You and I talked about this over the years. And one thing that I kind of wanted to bring up from one of the stories where you mentioned that you're the 27-year-old and there's 17 and 18-year-olds in your class.
Yeah.
And I remember when you first went in, and also when you're kind of doing your time, doing your tours, we would always connect on the regular or every so often. And I would always ask you because I just never had the courage to be like, all right, I'm gonna go to the military. And you lived your life compared to a 17 and 18-year-old that fresh out of high school. They go straight into like, okay, now you're a kid, now you're a man. Now go off with this gun and we'll fight.
Yeah.
Where you experienced life, so you're able to withstand some of those pressures a little bit better, right? And you tie that back to your graphic design. I think you just tied it back, is just tying back to life. You kind of understood and you had a little bit more life experience and an exposure to the world compared to a 17, 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's someone listening to this at some point that is an adult thinking, I'm at this glass ceiling. Maybe the military is. I kind of like Earl's story, and maybe I'm connected to some people around. I want to take this two different ways, but before I take it to the second way,
Yeah.
for somebody who is considering going into the military as an adult that's had some career life experiences, career professional experiences, what are some things they should take away from your story? Like some key bullet points that they could say, okay, hey, I've done this. What are some skill sets that I can apply if I want to transition to the military?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the coolest things that one person can bring is that level of maturity, like no matter what, because you have that life experience. But like, if you bring that in immediately, you are like sought out to be a leader already. I think the way the military treats, the ranking system is still based off of like, time in service, at time in your rank and grade and everything, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to leading people. Like you can still be a leader within your ranks. You could still be a leader within even the smallest or like whatever, or you are given that opportunity because people seek that out. So that's one thing. I mean, that's probably like an obvious thing, right? But here are the things that are probably not as obvious. The skill sets that you bring into the military may not seem like there's like a direct correlation, but there are so many jobs within the branches. So let's just say that you're in tech right now. There are tech jobs in the military that make you advance just as well. I will say that you're not going to get paid as well, but you will have every opportunity to get like the experience while serving for a purpose, right? The purpose is to use your skill set in order to enhance or make the military more capable. Say in the tech field. So there is a job out there, and then I think one of the things that like as an adult going in, you definitely have the opportunity to like I wouldn't say start over, but you just add another layer to your resume, right? If you don't have to make it a career, you do have to sign a contract for say 3.5 years, but you're adding another layer to say, another layer to your personality, but more importantly, like you're adding a layer to your skill sets that you can bring over. Um, I think when people say they want to transition to the military or just think about the military at all, they think it's forever. It's not forever. It's a volunteer thing and it's a contract and that's all you do. The people that stay are the ones who say, hey, like this actually works out for me, like because it's a personality fit.
Yeah. So this leads into your last points lead into kind of that next question, right? Share with the audience at some point,
Yeah.
when my statement of how many tours have you done? And you mentioned it's not a forever thing. You can eventually branch out. And there are folks listening to this call that are either in the military thinking, what next? What do I do next? And do I branch out or do I continue to stay? And we've had friends that have left the military to branch off and be a civilian and work regular odd jobs. So I really like the point that you said it's adding the extra layer to your resume already, which is you're a graphic designer, you went into the military, but what are you doing now still in the military that the audience you could share with? But then I know that you and I've had conversations of like life after the military.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where does N.O.P.E come in? And right, like the
Yeah.
whole point of this is network creating opportunities for yourself, being prepared and continue to excel. So what does life after military look like for you?
Yeah. So in one of my tours, or after I finished one of my tours from 2019 to 2020, I was at a moment of man, I'm a little tired. Uh, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know if I'm like excelling where I need to be because I felt like I was in that stage again where I'm like, I have my success, but what is success to me? Like, what is the definition of success? Um, with all the experience that I had throughout the years and everything, I started looking into getting out of the military. And I remembered how I'm like where like how I got here is I just felt like there it just seems like there wasn't anything available after the military. Like again, how do you bring a skill set from the military back into the civilian world? It's like it has like no correlation, right? Again, I didn't want to make sure that I'm believing my doubts and everything. So obviously there's like I try to research and whatever. But one of the biggest things I found out was I went through a program called the Honor Foundation. It's funded by the Navy SEALs. Um, I would say that, having a few Navy SEAL friends and then being like a combat diver, like I'm seeing that world between people who like live and breathe in the water and everything. They come together, and that's how I like kind of got semi introduced to it. And I remember feeling lost. I remember feeling like, man, there's no way that there's life after the military. They're like, how do I get a job in tech if I haven't touched like modern tech? I've touched military tech, but not, the modern day tech. So how I networked was using the Honor Foundation. It was structured to help people transition from the military into the workforce, but not necessarily like, oh, hey, here's a job, go figure it out. No, it's more of like, hey, this is how you should conduct yourself when you're out. This is how you change your language so people can understand. These are the people that you need to talk to fully grasp like military language and then transfer it to a language that everybody can understand. That networking part, especially going through LinkedIn, especially going through just putting yourself out there. I wouldn't say putting yourself out there. What's a better word? Like networking with a purpose, right? You're not just like, oh, hey, here's my resume. Like I'm going to sign up for 100 things, right? And you can cast that wide net, but you want to be like very strategic on how you do it. And that's what the Honor Foundation did. Because of that, I would say for the people who are like transitioning out right now, the opportunities are definitely there. You just need to really, really understand how to get those opportunities by your network. It's not like, don't, fire up an Instagram or whatever and just start adding friends from all over the world. No, you have to be very strategic because strategic networking gives you almost unlimited opportunities. Say like, a lot of people say, oh, like I have a tech background and a clearance. And they're going to be like, oh, you have a clearance. Well, hey, that clearance of whatever you have opens another door for you, right? That's another opportunity. And just like the military and what they do, they'll, you go through a process where they kind of like help phase you out into the military side and like you get some time off, or you can probably go intern. Those are key moments, or that's a key time to like really take and prepare what you need to do. So like literally understanding how you dress, understanding how you do interviews, understanding how you set up your resume. Take that time to put it all together because that is the preparation part that a lot of people kind of miss because you have two types of military people out there: military people who are entitled or military people who don't know what they're doing. And you can't really put that bridge because the entitled military person is like, oh, I'm an Army veteran or I'm a military vet. Give me a job right now. It doesn't work that way, right? It's not going to work that way. And then you have like the person who's kind of lost because I wouldn't say lost, but the military does take care of you in a lot of ways. They'll pay for your housing, they pay for your medical, they pay for every single thing that you can think of to make sure that you're a soldier and all you do is do soldier tasks. When you get out, no one's going to take care of you on that. You have to find your medical, you have to find all that stuff. And those are the things of why that soldiers kind of get lost as they're getting out. And then excelling after that, right? Where I'm at right now is because I found out that one, I knew that I couldn't just get away from the military. I wanted to still see if it was an opportunity. So I went with the National Guard. Not every unit will have a reserve or National Guard component to that. So after doing my research, this is where I excel. I still maintain my status as a Special Forces soldier, but I do it part time. And because I did it part time and I network with the people that I want to network with, I got my job here in DC working with one of the agencies here. That makes me marketable across the board from now both civilian and military because I'm typically doing both. I'm doing a job that supports the military or the Department of Defense, and then I'm still in the Department of Defense, excelling all the support that we're getting.
Yeah. These are interesting points. I think you and I were having these conversations. This when you were in that program, remind me the name of the program,
Which one?
the mentorship program.
Oh, the Honor Foundation.
Is that available for like every military vet that's coming out, or is this like special like the officer rankings?
Actually, yeah. So I can't say if I know it now because it's been so long. They may have changed it, but the Honor Foundation was set up for all special operation forces. So
Okay.
if you are a Navy SEAL, if you're part of MARSOC, if you're say like a CCT with the Air Force Ranger or part of Ranger Bat, not Ranger Tab, or if you're part of Special Forces, like the Special Operation Forces like that. They only cater to that community specifically.
So
That is,
it's not
yeah,
meant for it's not going to be meant for that 17, 18-year-old that you went to basic training with.
right, and that never made it. Yeah,
Yeah. So a couple things here that you brought up, where there's entitled, and then there's essentially the ones that don't know what's next.
yeah,
I was one of those entitled coming out of college, where I was like, "Hey, I have a college degree. Who's going to hire me? Like,
yeah,
this college degree is going to get me a job. What are you talking about?" And
yeah.
it creates a sense of complacency. And the whole purpose of this N.O.P.E is not to be complacent. It's to network, and it's not to be entitled to ask, oh, because Earl, you and I are friends, you're going to get me here. You're going to get me a job there. It's how do you network the right way that program, that mentorship program taught you how to do that.
Yeah.
But the purpose of this podcast is to expose the audience to understand, like, okay, how are you not, even though you've had this breaking point in your career or whatever field you're at and you're hitting this glass ceiling, don't think of it in the mentality of being entitled. How do you apply yourself with the network that you have and create those opportunities? Because you're never going to get, it's very rare to get yes to the first thing that comes at your door.
Oh yeah.
You can't have a bluebird fall on your lap and all of a sudden you're like, you hit stride and you're off and running. For me, that didn't happen. I had to continue to network and ask the right questions, ask the wrong questions, fall on my face multiple times.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's people here that are going through that. Everyone, whether it's people breaking into tech out of college, people trying to get into the military, people in the military trying to break out, people trying to get financial literacy, people that are struggling with mental health. Those are things that your statement that you were just saying about the entitlement and that mentorship and not wasting people's time. It's like, okay, hey, thank you for this. Like, what are some things I should walk away with knowing to apply to my skill set? And I really want to just kind of highlight that before we went any further.
Yeah.
Because for you can share all your points, but I think it still applies to just every industry and field that does military. And I remember, I think this was in 2020 when you're going through that mentorship, right? Because I think we were all in this COVID state and this pandemic state and this shelter in place. And I remember talking to you about this mentorship, and you were trying to break out. And my antennas like flew up when you're like, oh, I'm thinking about trying to get into tech, and you're telling me about the leaders that you're talking to that were ex-military.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is great. Like, Earl, yeah, this is what you want to do. This is what you want to talk about. And I remember you telling me about the different industries that you're trying to break into in tech. And I was like trying to give you that landscape. But you had that network already. And Um,
Well, no, kind of. Like you actually helped out a lot when you were talking about that because you taught me all the lingo.
yeah,
Like, yeah, like I didn't understand like what the lingo was, and like granted that they're helping me out, but like they're it's like it was like a course, right? A very like lay down course of like, hey, here's how you should network. But at the end of the day, you had to still do the network. They didn't give you the network. They just kind of tell you like, hey, maybe you should talk like this, or maybe you should do this. But the most frightening thing was like, well, I mean, that's why I say you helped out because um, if I didn't know the lingo between like man, now I forgot like a product manager or yeah, product manager. If I didn't know what that was, I was just been like, oh, a person that manages products, like like
yeah,
or I mean, you told me about like Scrum and all that stuff and Agile and all this and understanding what Salesforce was. Like, those are huge components across like the all tech industries, right? Like that's almost their standard of that. They didn't say that in like in that honor foundation. They just kind of just showed you like, hey, you should understand your what you're getting into and know like their lingo.
sure.
So you were like the almost like the pinnacle of that thing because we were talking back and forth a lot, especially try to connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing that's critical, right? It's people a lot of times don't realize the network that they have in front of in front of them. And
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you, just to catch up with me, you didn't even know that you had that network talking to me on the phone.
yeah, and that was
And
the coolest thing because it was just like a small. I think it was just like a small like, hey man, I think I'm gonna try to get into like a Cisco or some tech, and you were immediately like on it, like
yeah, and
yeah,
I think I have friends today that I used to work with at Salesforce that are in sales, that are kind of stuck at the fork in the road. Like, do I want to do sales forever? Is this for me? I've been successful, but like, am I happy? And what do I do next? And I have to find this happy medium of financial means. And I always tell like my friends or tell people that are listening to this podcast is, the analogy, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. There's multiple ways to enter through a house. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the front door, right?
yeah,
You can go in
yeah,
through the back. And uh, credit to Asian philosophy and the metaphysical Tao. And but
yeah.
that's probably one of the only things I learned. But
Yeah,
um, I think though too, it's critical for this podcast to just kind of create that awareness of like it's the network is there in front of you. Just you need to ask the right questions, and then what are you going to learn from that specific person that you can apply to the next thing, to the next person you're talking to the next opportunity. And um, even one of my friends in jujitsu, who is a personal trainer, he's so connected in the Silicon Valley and network with so many different people. And he said something to me one time where he said, sometimes your network is your biggest asset. College is great. I went to college, but it's how you apply yourself after. And I
yeah,
think for the takeaway from this session is not just you just being in the military. It was you had this fork in the road as a graphic designer, and you just you weren't happy and didn't have that gratification. So you broke out, but credit to the network that you had and that CrossFit gym, and you just having the genuine curiosity to learn more. and
yeah,
and then you went out and you just said, I'm just gonna talk to this recruiter, I'm talk to that recruiter. Where's my niche? They're gonna sell me on this, they're gonna sell me on that, but where am I happy?
yeah,
Right. And we have about 5 minutes left, so I kind of want to leave it back to you and just kind of
yeah,
close
yeah.
it out. Like, what are some additional things? I think we kind of harped on it several times throughout this last hour. What are some things you want people to walk away with from your story that they can apply to their everyday life or their next opportunity?
Yeah. I I would say the boldness, right? Like you got to be bold, not like, oh, I got to go take like the biggest leap. You just got to be bold enough to believe in yourself that you can do it, right? It is completely important to understand where your ego is, how comfortable you are, and where you're at, and knowing that being comfortable is not necessarily being successful, Success is truly based on everyone that you can define. But the biggest part, I think one of the biggest things is like the breakout part, right? Like the moment you break out of that shell, even if it's just a small breakout, that is already like the first huge step of redefining yourself and adding another layer to your skin. Like that is not a lot of people will take that step. But even if you try to research on something new, that's 10 times or 100 times better than staying where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And shameless plug for those seeing this podcast and seeing our decal. Earl, through my network, helped build Getting to Yes with N.O.P.E podcast image logo. So thank you again. Personally, want to thank you again for that.
Work in progress. Work in progress.
Yeah, work in progress. We're still iterating.
We're gonna make it better.
Yeah, getting better day by day. And I think for anyone else that wants to learn more about your story, how do they get in contact with you? What are some social platforms they can get in contact with you, or just kind of continue to follow you and follow your journey?
Yeah. So on a professional standpoint, please reach out on, look for Earl Miguel on LinkedIn. And then if you ever just want to kind of chat and follow, like you can find me on Instagram at real_Earl__. So
awesome. Yeah. And I know that just to kind of close it out, you've always had a lot of different ventures that you have a lot of side projects too, outside of just being in the military. And tell us really quick as we close this out, what are some other things that you've been working on that you want to kind of let the people be aware about as well too?
Yeah. So I did this all in the military, right? I started a local like brick and mortar business. It's wine and design. It's an East Coast franchise. I'm working on like a couple of children's books for my son, and I'm working on a couple other like e-commerce stores that can help like propel like what I'm trying to do with like with the current job that I'm doing right now. So
yeah, awesome. Yeah. I've helped contribute to those children's books, which was for my son. And I look forward to the continued series that come out even more. And this just kind of goes back to your wheels are always turning, right? You're always thinking about what next and how do I continue success. But your definition of success is maybe different from mine, maybe different from everyone else, but you're still propelling forward, right? So, and you're continuing to create those network opportunities. So, Earl, thank you again for jumping on. For everyone else listening in, if you enjoy this podcast, as mentioned again, please like, comment, subscribe, share it. If you want to reach out to learn more, please feel free to reach out to Earl directly. Please feel free to reach out to myself. And if you want to be a guest on my podcast, please do not hesitate to reach out. I will drop the link below with all the necessary information. But thank you again to Getting to Yes with N.O.P.E.